Today, I sit down with our generation's most popular NBA player on the planet. Not naming Michael, Kobe, and LeBron. So popular that in 2012, the Global Language Monitor declared his movement had met its criteria to be considered an English language word. We're talking Linsanity. And yes, with 30% of NBA fans and revenue coming from Asia-Pacific markets, Jeremy Lin is not only a insanely talented point guard in the NBA, I wrote that, but has positioned himself fantastically across multiple markets in the US and ASPAC. He's a sophisticated marketer, has equity positions in several companies, but is inspired by his off-court endeavors, starting with the Jeremy Lin Foundation. I'm telling you, he's as cerebral as any professional athlete I've spoken with. He's a great person, and I'm excited to share this conversation with you. Enjoy. When us men go out to shop, especially for new trends, we run into some common problems. In store, we either have trouble locating the men's department, finding out what we want, and if we do, it's often not in our size. When we order online, we may think we know what's hip, and there's a hint it's probably not. But when we think we find it and we order it, often it arrives and doesn't fit. Bombfell is an easier way for men to get better clothes. You can complete a simple questionnaire and are then matched one-to-one with a dedicated personal stylist. When you sign up, you pay $0. That's right, you only pay for the clothes you keep, period. Bombfell is the only styling service that does not charge any fees to work with them. Here's how the process works. You go online and you sign up. You set up your order and you choose between items you want delivered, the style and fit. I chose tight pants, fitted button-down t-shirts, my personal style at the moment. Then you get a preview email of what's to come, and shortly thereafter, your package will arrive. Everything is fully personalized. Each piece has been handpicked for you by your own stylist. That stylist will then email you her or his selections, after which you'll have 48 hours to make any changes, or even cancel it altogether. You're in total control. Personally, I went through the process, got exactly what I was looking for, and was very pleased with the quality of fabrics and the selection from my stylist. So, here's what I was able to pull off for you suiting up listeners. Since, and this is in parentheses, I think fashion is part of what I do, I was able to negotiate with Bombfell to get a $25 offer for all of you listeners. That's the best offer of any show across podcasts, and I'm proud of that. It's $25 off your first purchase. Here's how you do it. Go to bombfell.com/Rabil. That's BOMBFELL.com/Rabil. Bombfell.com/Rabil. It's Bombfell. Open and clothes. So I've got our first NBA guest on the show. We're both located in Brooklyn. We've previously shared publicists, both vested in a common digital media company. We enjoy social media, enjoy having fun, we enjoy joking. You've taken your jokes primarily more to YouTube than me, but I will talk about that in a little bit. And we come from Christian upbringings, but from different coasts. So Jeremy, I want you to first talk about growing up in San Francisco, choosing basketball, excelling at it, and ultimately why you chose to go east to Harvard.
Growing up in Cali was pretty much everything you thought it could be. It was 75 and sunny every single day, always playing outdoors. I just assumed the world was like Cali, just like amazing weather, you know. I loved playing basketball and soccer, and actually soccer was probably like, I might have been better at soccer and even my favorite sport at one point. And then in Cali, you had to choose between basketball and soccer for the winter season. So I just felt like there's something inherently wrong with playing like 90 minutes of soccer and then like the score being 0-0 at the end and like ending in a draw. I was like, oh no, that's definitely not happening. Yeah. So I went with basketball. And then I ended up on the East Coast, not by design or choice, but really because it was like last option. Like I was begging the Stanford team to let me play there. I wanted Cal and UCLA, anybody in back then the Pac-10 to recruit me to play basketball. But the only real offers or interest I was getting was from, Harvard and MIT. So I kind of just chose between those two. And
why do you think that was? You were the Northern California Player of the Year in high school.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the race component, which has been brought into discussion a lot and has been, I mean, on paper or just from looking at me, it doesn't seem like I would be somebody who would excel. And then I also think, like I was super raw and underdeveloped. Like I was 170 and like couldn't do a pull-up, could barely bench press 135, could barely squat 135. So I was very raw and I had never really lifted in my life, and everything was about me just looked like I would struggle at the next level. And so I always have known race was a big part of it, but I've also known that there are other factors. But then at the end of the day, winning NorCal Player of the Year and California Player of the Year, I just did feel like, maybe there's, being slighted and being underlooked. But hey, it worked out, man.
Your parents are from Taiwan.
Yeah.
And growing up in one of the more socially progressive states in California, where you think now having experience on the East Coast, there are fewer kind of racial barriers in playing basketball, and how did your parents kind of help you navigate through that process?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when I was young, I would say more of the barriers were probably from Asian Americans themselves.
Yep.
In terms of like, why would you, like my parents got a lot of criticism. Like, why would you let your kids play that much basketball? Why would you spend that much money, on these travel teams, et cetera? And then I think as I got older, and got better, by the time I got to maybe like 9th grade and above, I started to experience people outside of California. Obviously in California, we have so many Asian people. So, it is rare for an Asian to be playing basketball at a high level in California, but it wasn't rare for Asians to be playing basketball in California. If you go on the streets, play pickup or whatever, you'll see them. It was when we started traveling, or when I went to the East Coast, when I went to these other areas where they had never seen an Asian on the court, and maybe some of them have never seen an Asian before, period. Yeah. And that's when it was just like, and all that other stuff.
Yeah. I always tell kids when there was a moment that clicked for me in lacrosse was I always knew and was told by my coaches and parents that I had to practice against the wall, lacrosse style, and yours would probably be shooting hoops, and because that was the only way to improve. But then there was a moment when I think it was in 9th grade, where I practiced because I wanted to, and it was just really fun to do that, and that's when I noticed all the growth from a technical component. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you didn't lift that much. I didn't lift that much in high school either. It's different now. These kids now are all benching and squatting a ton of weight at a young age. But, from a skill component, what would you say helped you perform at a high level? Was it more just passion and obsession, or were you really focused on technique, and how'd you go about that?
I would say it was probably... When I was up until 11th grade, it was probably just pure passion. Yeah. I just played way more than everybody else. I would play during lunchtime sometimes. And then I would go to practice, and then I'd play for 3 to 4 basketball teams at once. And then after I might have 3 practices in one day. And then after that, I would go to the YMCA until 10 at night. So I just play all day, but it wasn't crazy technical. I would say the only thing that was really technical was the coaches that I played for. Yeah. During those practices, they were very fundamental based. But then it's kind of like what you're saying about having it click was when I got to high school and I was too slow. And when I first got there, I was too slow and too short. And I asked my coach how I could, get to the basket. And so he gave me some drills, and it started to work. And then, that's when I started to see all right, now not only is it just I'm playing all the time, but now I know how to focus my energy and my the calories that I'm burning. What do I do with that? How do I make that efficient? And I think that became an obsession of learning how to push myself, learning where to push myself. And then the more success I got, I felt the more it fed my inner desire to want to improve. Yeah.
Sounds like that inner desire has a lot to do with a cerebral process of understanding, okay, this is what I'm really skilled at. Now, if I add this type of instruction and angles and movement, and then get me to a place where, as your career progressed, you were undrafted. You played in the D League. You went overseas into China, and then you ended up back west with Golden State. and then eventually to the Knicks in 2012, which we'll talk about, like Linsanity and all that stuff, because I think it's really interesting from a business component. Yeah. But I'd imagine things got really serious, right, as they do with professional sports, and you kind of talk to athletes about getting back to that moment of playing for enjoyment. That transition, was it always a goal for you to, no matter what, whether you're not drafted, going out for Golden State, playing D-League, going overseas, was it always getting to the NBA, or was it more experience and process?
When I was younger, I wasn't very much of an experience or process type guy, you know? Like, it was just like, this is what I want, and I will not stop until I get it. And that, for me, was the NBA. So it was really always like, I was always like, you know, I had a one-track mind coming out of college. I even told my agent, like, I don't want you talking to any overseas teams. Like, he ended up having discussions because that's his job as an agent. But in terms of as it relates to me, I was like, I don't want anything to do with any overseas teams until, like, I know I can't make it in the NBA. But I did feel like there were definitely times where, because I was so one-track minded and ambitious and, you know, whatever, like, obsessive about it, it did kill like the enjoyment of the game at some point. And I had to like learn how to really balance, like, all right, I'm going to enjoy and live in the moment, but then I'm also going to chase my dream or my goal. And like, how do you balance those two things and like find peace in it? Yeah.
And you've said that your spirituality has helped you with that.
Yeah.
Keeping perspective in your relationship with God.
Yeah. Everything. It's been everything for me.
Yeah. Can you talk about being evangelical Christian?
Yeah, I think for me it was just like, you know, it was that point in New York where the first 2 weeks of Linsanity was like the coolest thing ever. But, you know, the following 2 weeks after that was kind of like a burden. Like, I had to be what everybody wanted me to be and live up to what everyone else wanted me to live up to. And I felt like that's when, like, it was like a month after the first breakout game that I was like, dude, I'm not happy. And I was like, man, success is so fleeting. Like, reaching certain peaks, like we see that in sports all the time. We see like the greatest winners in so many different sports, and what do they want? Like, they want more. Like, I guarantee you Tom Brady next season is not going to be like, well, at least I won it last year, so I'm chilling, you know?
Right. Like, it's that never enough pandemic.
Yeah. And then, you know, I'm sure as an athlete and a like supreme athlete, elite athlete, like, you know, like there's like a chip on your shoulder. There's always another challenge. Like, you just naturally are wired to be like that. Like, what's the next thing I can take over? And then just getting back to my faith was like, all right, well, like, God had to really teach me, pry some things out of my control, because I was trying to control everything, trying to hold on to everything. And he was showing me like, hey, like, even if you don't have a starting position or like a global brand, or, you know, even if you aren't beloved by all the fans, like, I'm still going to be enough for you in terms of just like me, my relationship with you, salvation. Like, it's going to be good enough. It's going to be more than good enough. And I think like getting to that point, which is something I still wrestle with at times, but like learning to figure that out was like, hey, like, there's a deeper sense of peace and purpose and joy, even if I'm not achieving what I once was achieving.
Yeah.
And I think when you get to that point, it's like you figured it out.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It sounds a bit like D. Smith, who we had on the podcast, NFLPA executive director, and he tells his players that football is what they do, not who they are. And that balance, that mindfulness, I think we're seeing a big pop in mindfulness across all industries in today's modern world, with everything that's going on overseas and politics and religion, and people are meditating and trying to clear their minds, be more present. And I think that's the ultimate challenge for athletes, though, is that we're so measured by our results, immediate results, that you're right, you were encouraged to get the next one and forget about the last win the next championship, score the next point, and at all costs. So, you know, given that it's the life that we've chosen, and you mentioned still battling with it, and I do myself, what are you structuring? Like, what's your day-to-day like? I know you're coming right in from practice, and how are you then balancing each day?
You're talking about from like a spiritual standpoint?
From a spiritual and playing, right? Because I think once you're on the court, once I'm on the field, you just become the athlete.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, at least I've been trying to work myself on balancing or having better balance around that, and that helps with that kind of juggling act that we're talking about. Definitely.
I think a couple of things. I mean, I like to do devotionals. I think those are like, it's like food for me, like I need food every day. I need my devotional. So I try to do that in the morning, read the Bible and pray. And then at night I try to read like a Christian book and then like kind of think about the day or what happened. And sometimes I have different topics to pray about. So like Monday might be, I pray for myself. Tuesday, I pray for my family, and so on and so forth. And then I try to like respect and honor a Sabbath in terms of like, one day out of the week for those 24 hours, I'm not working out or thinking or doing anything basketball related. Because, as I'm getting older, it's like I might not be able to spend as much time on the court, but I can spend more time watching film or doing other things. And it's like I can still like, if I'm constantly like immersed and obsessive and like thinking nonstop about it, I feel like I'll burn out, really, is what's going to happen, which has happened in the past. And
for you personally? Or
like I've burned out, like after certain seasons, it's just like, I can't do this, get away from basketball. Or even during seasons, there's been times where it's like, man, like, I don't know, dude, like, I can't do this anymore. And so I just try to do that. And then I try to surround myself with people who I really enjoy being around. And so I work out a lot with my brother. I have my trainer. When my older brother's there, I always work out with them. And then the people that we work out with, we always try to like kick it, grab food after, like, just chill. And like, and I think having balance and like having relationships and like doing these things like prevents me from becoming like, OD, like, psychotic about it.
Yeah.
Because I think to be great, you do have to be somewhat psychotic.
Oh, yeah. You have to be obsessive.
Yeah, for sure.
Bingo.
But then, like, you had to figure out, like, and that's where some people don't understand. It's like, dude, like, maybe we're just wired differently, but, like, sometimes I can't turn the switch off. So it's like I have to find ways to turn it off or, like, to, like, simmer the, like, fire inside of me to want to be great or whatever.
Yeah. Well, what's great, too, about athletes is that we back our way into thought leadership on certain areas that broaden out for all people, no matter what they do, and those being nutrition and fitness and recovery, which are core components to continuing self-improvement performance at a high level. So from a nutritional standpoint, I wanted to ask you if there's anything specific that you've done or you've evolved, particularly in basketball. I mean, you guys burn so many calories, and it's a hardwood sport, which for the life of me, when I see guys that are playing 18 years in the NBA, I just don't get it. Because, this is an impact sport on hardwood.
Yeah.
We talk about like swimmers and the longevity in golf and just like even soccer over in Europe being on natural grass versus artificial turf, and the impact that I feel on my joints being on artificial turf. So I would imagine you guys have to be really thoughtful around nutrition and the type of fitness you do off the court or during the off season and the recovery.
Yeah, that's and it's escalated even more because in the NBA you're playing 82 times. It's like 4 times a week, basically. Like, how do you prepare your body so that you can be primed? And it's like, nutrition, sleep, ice bath, and they have all these different tools, and then soft tissue is like, there's so many different things like stretching. And so as every NBA player gets older, we kind of figure out like what works for my body. And it really is, during the season, it really is a 24-hour job. Like when 10 o'clock rolls around, you start thinking about like, all right, counting the hours, what time I need to get up, how many hours I'm going to get.
How many hours are you getting?
I try to get 9 every night.
9 every night?
I try to.
That's great.
It doesn't always work out.
Yeah.
And there's obviously with the travel schedule, sometimes it's like remotely, like it's like not even close. It's impossible. There's some nights where you're inevitably going to get 5, 6. And So yeah, but
And what about
I try to do
eating
all that.
patterns around competition? Are you guys playing at night for the most part? You guys have a specific schedule of trying to eat 3 full meals or sometimes 4?
For a typical game day, we might play at 7 or 7:30. Try to get a breakfast in before shoot around. After shoot around, I try to get in like maybe like a smaller meal, and then so I'll eat at like 10. I'll eat at 12. And then around 3 or 4, I'll eat again, another small meal. Mm-hmm. And then the game's at 7, and then I'll eat like a monstrous meal after the game.
Do you have trouble falling asleep after games?
Oh my goodness, yes.
It's an adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
I remember playing in college. We would always play at 1 o'clock, and I would just be so tired by 10.
Yeah.
And the game would end at 3, and I kind of figured there would be this 5 to 6 hour runoff of adrenaline that started happening, but I didn't notice it because we had afternoon games and I'd fall asleep my normal time. When I went pro and we started playing at 7, 8 o'clock, I have trouble getting to bed before 3.
Yeah.
Because you have that 5-hour release of adrenaline.
Yeah, it's like that's a super interesting thing that I wish like we talked about more as athletes, but like even like for us, like caffeine is one, or like pre-workout drinks are like really big in the NBA because there's so many nights where guys are just super tired or hurting. And so a lot of them will, a lot of the athletes will take these drinks, and that affects your sleep too. Because now you have adrenaline, now you have that caffeine. How much caffeine did you take? Like what time did you take it? Like what is your body used to? And like there's been times where like I couldn't sleep till like 5.
Yeah.
It's like because I'm so wired, and it is like it really there's like a science and an art behind all of that, and like what time, how much, the dosage, like weaning off of it, like all these different things. I definitely know like I can't play a game and go to sleep. I usually have to play video games, read, and do like eat and do a bunch of stuff, and then like I'll chill out.
But ultimately, we as for the most part as athletes, you do whatever you have to do to be ready for the game. Yeah. So if you've scheduled all the way out and then like you're still tired for some reason, you're doing that pre-workout or you're taking a bunch of caffeine because you have to perform.
No question. 4 games in 5 nights, pre-workout.
Yeah. So let's talk about 2012 when you came to the Knicks and started playing well. Linsanity happened. Led the league in jersey sales. Was the first New York player to be on back-to-back Sports Illustrated covers. Just like tons of press, endorsement articles coming in. There were ebooks being written online about you. I saw a stat that the number of Asia Pacific Americans in New York City alone is around 450,000, which is a larger number than like Cleveland, Miami, and some of the other NBA cities total. So there were like viewing parties for you and stuff like that. What was that experience like out of the gates?
It was like surreal, but like I wish like there was another word beyond surreal, because that's like what I would use to describe it. And like there's so many things. The thing is, there's so many things that are going on off the court, like these viewing parties and things like that, and these ebooks that are being written that like I had no idea about. Like I was just going through it. I was trying to focus on the game, focus on my team, and like there was a lot of outside noise, and like I was literally putting together pieces of what had happened, or like in my mind it was like I had such a small concentrated picture, and I was not able, because I was blocking myself from like listening and reading and seeing what was going on outside. And like it was like even 3 years after, I was still like putting pieces into this big picture in my mind to really like picture like what Linsanity was for the world. And like I'm still learning that every day through like conversations with people, and like, hey, you affected me this way, you affected me that way. And it's like, dude, as athletes, like that's the last thing that we're kind of thinking about when we're like trying to play and prime ourselves for, and like when you do well, it's like you enjoy it that night, and then the next day it's like next game, you know? And so you're like so like onto, flipping the page constantly. So it was surreal in one sense, but then it was also like intense like focus, because I had never been in that position before, and I wanted to like make sure I continued to do well. Yeah,
I think that's really interesting. The case for a number of athletes that have fully hit that mainstream light is that to get to that point, they had visualized that level of success. Just like you were so driven to make the NBA, I'm sure it didn't stop at making the NBA. You were probably dreaming in the backyard of performing, whether it be at MSG or out in Golden State at a high level consistently like you did, but you don't anticipate then the impact. And so the social impact, though, that went far beyond just being a mainstream player had a lot to do with, you talk about Asia Pacific and the basketball marketplace, which some statistics say that represents from 20 to 30% of NBA fans, and you became that role model for a lot of Asia Pacific players. You then take those steps to mentorship, and you have this foundation backed by your Christianity and your humble upbringing. And I would argue that fewer people were prepared to take that on as you were.
Yeah, I mean, it was
still hard.
Yeah, I don't even know if I was prepared. I always knew what I wanted to do, but actually the actual execution and oh man, there's so many mistakes we made, so many things I learned, and it was just like kind of what we were talking about before we started the podcast too. Is just like we envision like being great at our sport, but we don't really envision being like CEOs of these little companies that we run, or like being PR like publicists for ourselves, or like learning the marketing, or like how do you explore, like we have never been taught how to do these things. And so like you're figuring all this stuff out on the fly, and this is every athlete that has to go through that. Like, how do I manage my team, and how do I find the right people to listen to, and how do I like create this impact and this legacy that I want to create, and at the same time like never being educated or having any work experience in it. And I think that's kind of what I was trying to figure out. And I knew I wanted to do something with the foundation. I always said that. And I had started it. Luckily, I had started it the year before. But there were many mistakes that were made. And there was a lot of, but like now I feel like there's like these unique experiences in business and in philanthropy and in marketing and in esports and social media that like I've just been kind of baptism by fire, forced to learn on the fly. And it's been like amazing too. It's been an amazing ride.
Yeah. It's a lot like what entrepreneurs say, just, when you take that jump, you're just immediately drinking from the fire hose, and it's just, you can't stop it. It's just coming right at you.
Yeah.
And so I think what I'd be curious in first is as you approached this CEO role of managing everything that's coming inbound, trying to put playing aside, because you did that really well. How did you go about kind of delegating with your agency, your publicist, managers? I'm sure your family was involved to a certain extent. And was that as much of a learning process in getting those kind of executives underneath you as CEO in place?
Yeah, so the route I chose to go with was I wanted to stay with the people that had been loyal to me and proven their loyalty to me, because during that time, a lot of people were changing around me, and a lot of people that I thought I could trust, like, were doing things that like were kind of shady. And so I told myself, like, I'm going to stick with my friends and my families and like the people who have proven to be like not about that life and like actually cared for me as a person. And the problem is they weren't all like my family, and like they didn't go to school and envision themselves becoming like business managers or like business developers for an athlete. So they're learning on the fly.
60-page contracts coming in from brands.
Exactly. And like, and then like this, so, I mean, there's just, it's been one of the most rewarding and challenging things. And like, I don't know anything personally about marriage or like having kids, but I would say that like this was probably like gives me at least a snippet of what marriage or having kids will be like, in that it's like extremely rewarding because you accomplish these things and you do these things and you go to quote unquote war with people that you love and your family members and people that you're close to. But it's so challenging because you have to learn how to communicate, do business, you have to learn how to, because you're going to offend each other all the time. Like choosing or going with one route, like naturally offends somebody else. It's like a referee, like calling a charge will offend the person who thought it was a block and vice versa. And so there's been a lot of challenges in terms of off the court. Like it's been, almost as hard as some of the stuff on the court in terms of like figuring that piece out and figuring out which voice to listen to, or like how much to listen to this voice, or what position to put this person in. And that has been a continual process of learning, but very, very rewarding.
Yeah, I got to imagine that. I can absolutely see where you're coming from. I do business with my brother Mike very often, and we've always been flagged, as I'm sure you were, don't mix family and business.
Yeah, and everyone says that.
Yeah, and because you have such a personal relationship, and you're right, communication, having those hard conversations and being thick-skinned enough.
Yep.
Is that those interpersonal skills that you're probably referencing and developing. So loyalty amidst everything that was coming in, particularly in New York, it sat atop of your needs, and then you kind of positioned those that you trusted as gatekeepers, and then enlisted more sophisticated people to look at endorsement deals that were coming in initially that you were saying no to.
Yeah.
And you had said no specifically around, wanting to keep your focus on the court, but we're talking tens of millions of dollars in endorsements.
Yeah, I mean, I just didn't want to
regret that at all.
No, I don't, because I never wanted to be like, and that's one thing my parents really taught me, is just like, don't be driven by money. So I've never really I'm not saying this in like a douche way, but like, I just have never been that, I just have never cared that much about money. Mm-hmm. God has blessed me with a lot of it, and more than I ever thought I could earn. But I was really happy growing up, and we didn't have that much. And so I was just kind of used to that, but I don't regret it at all. I always told myself, I want to be real. I want to be authentic. I don't want to endorse something that I'm just here, do this, eat this, buy this, and I don't do it myself. And so it just doesn't seem right to me. It's something that I kind of owe to my fans too. If they're going to be spending money or spending time on something, it has to be something that I actually believe in. And at the same time too, my passion was never to be on billboards or commercials, or my passion has always been to hoop and doing 6-hour photo shoots nonstop, so that you're so tired that you can't even get on the court, and having so many off the court ventures that you can't keep your focus on the court. Mm-hmm. That's always been man, I worked so hard to get to this point. Wouldn't it be kind of silly to then lose everything I've worked for because I'm so focused on something that I wasn't passionate about from the beginning? It just seemed like a really silly way to kind of jeopardize everything that I had put so much hard work into.
Yeah. Back to the court with sports psychology, and going back to probably just having a huge target on your back during that time of Linsanity. I remember watching you go off game after game, and then the subsequent team that you'd face, point guard, was I'm going to shut him down. How dynamic was that? Playing a team game, yet the attention being on an individual. And maybe what were some of the guys on your team or some mentors of yours that helped you, that had experience in the NBA?
Yeah, it was hard because the reason why I never played individual sports is because I don't like individual sports. I love the teamwork. So having all the success and sometimes failure attributed to one player has always been something that's been difficult for me to accept, just being I love being about the team. Mm-hmm. And during that time, one of the guys, Landry, I was really close with Landry and Steve Novak, but they hadn't been in the league as long. Not as long as me. They were young in the league, but they hadn't had as many experiences, so they're kind of going through it with me. But then with Jared Jeffries was kind of the older vet that I always asked him questions about, from how to manage your finances to how to make business decisions to X's and O's on the court. And he was the guy who always kind of told me dude, don't be naive. These people are out to get you. A lot of people will turn on you when they can. And if you give them a reason to, they will. And so he taught me, or allowed me to kind of see the world from a different perspective, because I was going into it what? No way. No one would ever hurt me. No one would ever no, the media would never write something bad about me. The organizations would never turn their back on me. And I just had learned, and so he was teaching me a lot of kind of just how the business world and the industry works. And I think he was really valuable in helping me there.
Yeah, it's just paranoia, right?
Yeah.
I think we see it with NBA players, NFL players, MLB players. I mean, kind of name the big four, big five sports, because of how commercialized the game and the player and the entertainer is. You look at like 30 for 30s broke and stuff like that. But I actually think most entrepreneurs are just as paranoid about their intellectual property, about their ideas, about competitors in the space. And I think that your strategy around creating that infrastructure of loyalty with your family, and then also everything that was coming across your desk had to be authentic to who you were. You're not going to spend time on 6-hour photo shoots and on endorsements. You started creating your own media too. And that's a really interesting strategy, one that I've adopted and tried to follow after you as well, and particularly on YouTube. What was it about that platform that has attracted you to it so much? And probably there's a life in LA for you in big films.
I think the first thing was that I had to really I was really hurt initially by some of the things that happened in the media. And I remember there were times when
in New York, right?
I don't really know what, some of them, but yeah, when I was during the time of Linsanity, because there were times when there would be articles that come out about, I went here and I did this, and I was drinking this and talking to this girl, and it was completely false, and I was with my family and they knew I was with them. So it was just completely made up. And then there are other times I remember where they were talking about my contract, and I remember this, I was waiting for my next contract after the Knicks, the one that the Rockets were offering me, and I didn't know what the contract was. And my agents were talking downstairs, and I was 2 floors above in the hotel just waiting. And I just turned on the TV, and they were saying this is the reported offer, and Jeremy Lin thinks this, and this about the offer. And when I started hearing that and seeing that, I was like, you know what? So much of a lot of what's going on is kind of lies, and that it creates it creates a perception that I'll never be able to change. A lot of the things even today that I'm still trying to fight are perceptions that or misconceptions that were created by a third party person who has really very minimal insight into my life. And that's when I was you know what? I really want to control my narrative and show who I really am, kind of going back to the authenticity piece, which is, for me, it was I could tweet and I could Facebook, but YouTube, you can really create videos. You can really show my personality or what I believe in, or the things that really make me tick, the things I love doing. And so we created, The Last Pick, or How to Get in Harvard, and all these random YouTube videos. And we felt hey, this is kind of who I am. When I'm hanging with my boys, this is who I am.
Right. Yeah, the message around the modern athlete and sort of why I even created this podcast was, and similar to what you see with Uninterrupted and the Players Tribune, although those both have raised a ton of money and are commercializing in their own respect, but the proliferation of social media has really gifted athletes an opportunity to take control back. And that's a side of the sport that I don't get exposed to, fortunately, in lacrosse, is the sources have told us that Jeremy Lin thinks this of his upcoming contract.
Yeah.
But strategy for YouTube. So you do stuff like endorsements, where we've been talking about endorsements. So a lot of it is, how to fit into the NBA, talk about these themes and the comedic side and the creative side of yourself, and putting production crews around you to bring it to life.
Yeah, I have one guy, Josh Fan, who helps me full time with a lot of the social media stuff, and he's also one of my closest friends. So it's very natural. He knows my personality. He knows how I think. He sees me when all the cameras are not around, and so he's his whole thing has always been, even to this day, is how do we bring more of that out? And he's still trying to get me to bring more of that out, because when I am in public or when the cameras are on, I just subconsciously I turn a lot of it off, who I am, I turn it off. And so you know, he's been like, hey, you know, sometimes I'll have an idea or sometimes he'll have an idea, and then like we'll start exchanging ideas, brainstorming, and then like it'll turn into a endorsements or something like that. And then we also have people like with endorsements. We had Wong Fu who helped us out, and we had the last pick, we had Jubilee Project, and so these are people that we know and trust, and like we're creating like storylines and storyboards and all, you know, all this stuff to be able to like, hey, we think this is like a direction that we want to go in.
Yeah, and you joined Whistle Sports, which was at the time a multi-channel network, now more of a modern digital agency. And the deal that you structured was partially equity based because you got in at an early stage. Was that something that you know, you feel like you've learned through this CEO position, as I'm calling you, and managing the Jeremy Lin brand on court, off of it, and obviously the guys that are running that business, Jeff Urban and John West, are really sophisticated guys coming from the brand side, actually now getting into media. Your approach there? Yeah,
I think you know, that's something that like, you know, I've had a lot of people, you know, my manager Patricia and my mom and Alan, my cousin, and Josh, like we all work together, and like we started, you know, we first started off with traditional endorsements, which we still do, and which really still have a purpose and a place. But then we were also thinking like there's certain, you know, passion projects, or there's certain things where I could see myself really long-term, like being heavily involved in. And it's like, these are the ones that I want equity in because their success is tied to like, I'm incentivized to really invest and put forth my effort into this company. And I'm also hoping for this company to succeed. And when you create that type of partnership, I think you create another level of authenticity, versus like, hey, here's X amount of dollars, just talk and pretend like you like, you know, whatever. So it's like, if Whistle Sports is like, here, like pretend like you like us, be like, all right.
Yeah.
But like, if I actually believe in Whistle Sports, I'm like, yeah, I want the equity and I want to be involved. So I do think like, and that's also a more long-term approach too, you know, like, because these companies will hopefully last for a long time. And like, I think one thing for every athlete is like, how do I make sure that I am creating like stable revenue, like for life? Because, you know, the average NBA career is like 4.5 years or 5 years or something like that. So it's like you have a short window to make a lot of money, but then like beyond that, like, you know, one of the things I think about, it's the same thing for my foundation, is like, I want sustainable revenue so that I can constantly give through my life. Like, I don't want to just give a lot until I'm 35 and I retire and I can't do anything anymore because I have nothing left. Like, I'd rather like learn, how can I continue to like have this revenue, and every month I have this revenue and I know what I want to do with it. I know like what organizations I can support. Like, I know where I want to go with that. And that, I think, is when you see real impact. And you see more long-term impact.
Yeah, that's like legacy.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Yao Ming when you were growing up being referenced in that category, and I suppose when you're done playing, the next group of successful ASPAC players will be referenced as the Jeremy Lins, the next generation of Jeremy Lins. And I think what you're positioning yourself around the platform Weibo, which I'm not as familiar with, but it's more of like a hybrid Facebook, Twitter platform based in China that has roughly 500 million users and 300 million daily actives.
Yeah.
So you're there. You have 5 million followers roughly there. I mean, all these platforms in place, and that's creating legacy, but also controlling messaging and positive messaging that you want to kind of make sure that the younger generation is living under. Is that right?
Yeah, that's like a very, very good way of saying it. Is just like, that's what I want like right now, that's how I can have like a small little footprint on this earth and like have a small little impact, is like controlling the message, saying what I want to say, and targeting and having a strategy. And like, you know, that's where I when I first went through Linsanity, everything was reactionary. Like, it was just like, there's a flood of things coming in, and I'm just trying to pick and choose and hold on to one as everything's flying by me. Now it's more like proactive. Like, I want to be here. I want to be in this space. I want to do this. And so I'm going to create these avenues, and I'm going to go and do these things. And that's part of what having a Weibo or WeChat or a YouTube channel is all about.
Yeah. Would you say that Linsanity represented like the highest and lowest moments of your life?
Yeah. I mean, for sure. Like, people talk a lot about Linsanity, but the time right before that and the time right after that were my two like lowest points in my life. Yeah. And I think like experiencing this tremendous roller coaster, like, I think has given me, more than anything, like, it's helped my spiritual life so much. And I think that's been the coolest part. Yeah.
The other areas that you're excelling in are, through a relationship with Quarterly, which is a subscription product delivery based service.
Yeah.
And then you're also, as you mentioned earlier, involved in esports.
Yeah.
And probably through interest, but also it sounds like a little bit of a calming down platform after games before you get to sleep, or when you can't sleep, like me. With Quarterly, there is, the Jeremy Lin of the spiritual side that you get access to, the seasonal side, some mementos that you've gathered from road games and stuff like that. Why Quarterly? And what have you learned from the subscription-based service, which seems to just be ubiquitous in all forms of content and product these days?
I thought it would be something cool, something to try to get like a space to try to get into where it's like. I like creative stuff, and I've always been like, this is kind of embarrassing, but like I've always loved like arts, crafts, pottery, ceramics, like stuff like that, like the creation of stuff. And so like being able to create like my own box and like put my own twist and flavor on it, and like I just think that's something that I really enjoy doing. I've always really enjoyed doing. And then also like it was a perfect tie into like my foundation, because I wanted people, because I noticed that like when you just say like, hey, here's a cause, everyone go online and donate, like that's probably not the most effective way these days.
It's not.
But if I can create something where the fans are getting what they want, which is probably a piece of my life or a piece of who I am, and in doing so, everything that we earned was donated to my foundation, like you're kind of like both parties are kind of winning to some degree. Like the fans are getting what they want, and then like I get the support from my foundation, which like I don't really need. I wasn't ever in it to like create like financial success for myself. It was more just like I want to promote this idea of philanthropy, thinking outside of yourself, seeing other people who are in need, and like how can I find a way or develop a passion to really help these other people, because there's always more people that are less fortunate. And like I think that's something that like is sometimes overlooked. And I think like there's some things in culture, at least in like that I've noticed as being an Asian and as being Asian and American, like seeing two different cultures, I've noticed like philanthropy is a really interesting topic.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the Jeremy Lin Foundation and ways that people can contribute? I know you've done a lot of different projects, and you've said that is going to be, or I've gleaned that that's going to be a big focal point of your legacy beyond basketball, is serving kids who are underprivileged.
Yeah, so basically what we try to do is everything we do is with underprivileged children, but we really try to help like every community that I go to, we try to find an underdog story. So, that's kind of, obviously I have a heart for the underdog, but like, let's say that I come to, like when I first got to Houston, it was like refugees and immigrants was an issue that was kind of swept under the rug, or maybe need a little more financial resource, or maybe need a little bit more exposure and awareness around that issue. And so I feel like, that's basically what we try to do, is we try to go to every single community and we try to find a way to support. And, when we go to Taiwan or China, there's very different issues. Like the issues in Taiwan are very different than the issues in China. And so we just try to support and be a part of that. And like the one thing I've been doing recently is the 1 Day's Wages campaign.
Yeah.
Just encouraging people, for one of your for 1 day's wage, basically give that up. And the issue that we chose is, girls empowerment. And that's kind of something that's like definitely an underdog story, especially globally, is like, how do you empower girls, young women to receive education and have more opportunities in life?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. One of our earlier guests on the pod was Julie Foudy, who's written a book on empowering women in sports. And one of my favorite documentaries is Misrepresentation, out on Netflix. But it's interesting you say that, because when we were talking earlier about Asian Americans in basketball and how those that are often leading that neglect are Asian Americans themselves, a lot of documentation in gender equality says that most of those that are hindering progress are women as well. And I just find that an interesting commonality, but one that I'm working on being more vocal around too, is equality in sports, be it racial or just generally socioeconomic, to gender, to religious based, to sexual orientation. And I think the premise of the modern athlete, and why I'm lucky to sit down with you, is it's not just about success on court, not just about leveraging new media to control messaging, authenticity, but it's about thought leadership. Because ultimately we are positioned to lead and be a proxy through other people's experiences, whether they've had them personally or not, on the equality front. And that's what you're doing through your foundation. Yeah,
and I think that's, us as athletes, it's just fun. It's just interesting because society loves athletes because they love sports, and then they love the people who can, do things that maybe they could never do.
Yeah.
And so there's like this natural fanaticism that's created. But like, I've always thought, like, when I was younger, it was like, dude, my career is everything. Like, my legacy, my career, how it turns out is everything. Now I really see my career as like the jump start of what I hope to be when I'm done playing is much more impactful than anything I can do on the court.
Yeah.
And that's like, that's kind of how I see my life, as I'm thinking like more long term, is like, this basketball stuff I love, and that's what I'm super passionate about, and hopefully it'll give me a platform, and then with this platform hopefully I can grow it and keep growing it, and then do things that I really want to see done in this world. And like a lot of the issues that you've talked about, and I like philanthropy and treating people the right way and things like that. Like, these are all like issues that I've been thinking about. And even with esports, it's like perceptions or like stereotypes on gamers. It's like, there are certain things that people think about. It's like, I know a lot of NBA guys who play a lot of video games, but like, no one's looking at them being like, man, they're probably like these Asian kids in their parents' basement wearing glasses and like eating like ramen or something. Like, that's like how people, like, sometimes people like make fun of gamers. Like, it's like, dude, like, I don't know, it's like the stereotype that you have can be like broadened, and like you can like rethink the way you're like thinking about everything right now.
Is your positioning with esports and Team VGJ, is that right?
VGJ.
Is that more around, your traditional endorsement, but you are encouraging, lowering barriers around that?
It's very, actually, I would say it's pretty non-traditional, because like what we're trying to do is really establish like culture in an organization where you're caring for the athlete. Like, I kind of know what it's like when like, or the feeling of being like traded or like cut, or like feeling like an organization like didn't have my back. But then like esports is like even worse, because they're so young as an industry. So like we see a lot of the players getting exploited, like the impact that they're creating, like they're not even coming close to being able to receive any of those benefits. And I see like college athletes are kind of similar. Like, and people talk like, I actually went and played at Harvard. I didn't even get a scholarship, and there's other players who get scholarships, and I still think they're not getting enough of what they deserve.
Right.
Like, because what the impact that they're creating and what they're doing for the university, it's like, and so I think that's something that I want to do with esports, is like help them like create this industry infrastructure where it's like, we're going to treat people the right way. Like, we're not just going to tell you like you need to show up and play really well and win us this game. Like we're actually going to care for you, your health, like your eating habits, your sleeping habits. Like we want you to feel at home. We want you to be cared for. Like there's going to be like open communication. Like there's going to be open dialogue. We want to be trustworthy. Like all these different qualities that we want to like instill into, you know, our team and at VGJ is kind of like, so it's very non-traditional, but really fun because I love esports and I love gaming.
Yeah, it sounds like a great example of you taking what you've learned and experienced in life and then helping now. Is it like more of like a management side that you're assisting in, or just like thought leadership and, you know, with VGJ, and how are you creating the environment that you want for these young players? Because just sheer economic impact around esports. Yeah. I haven't quite figured it out yet, but I know that you look at the Ted Leonsises and the Kraft Group, and they're all spending millions of dollars in investments into these organizations, and the impressions are gigantic. So what is your exact, like, how are you able to create the environment? Is it just by sheer influence, or you actually have stake in VGJ? Yeah,
so it's more like, how I would describe it is probably like kind of like a consultant. So there's me and my team that I like mentioned before, in terms of like we try to help them, we try to introduce them to the right people, we try to, and then like I went and watched when they played at the Summit, like I went and watched that, hung out with them, and it's like even as an athlete, I'm looking at their pregame routine, postgame, the environment, like how they communicate with each other, like what are they eating, how much are they sleeping, travel schedule. Like these are the things that like I've learned so much about it, not in esports but in professional sports. So like I feel like I have at least like some advice that I could give to them, and so it's kind of like this consultant type role, where it's like, and then we want our manager and our coach to like be treating them the right way, and we want the players to have fun being there. And it's actually very similar to what the Nets are kind of doing. Like the Nets are like trying to create this family atmosphere.
Oh yeah, they've done a ton, huh?
Yeah, they've done a lot.
And investing in the properties and bringing in just terrific resources for the players, right?
Yeah, they're very comprehensive.
So leadership is obviously a key pillar for you. While we were talking, your younger brother just walked in, and we were talking earlier about the impact that the family has had on Jeremy and how thankful he is for everyone's support. What's younger brother getting into, and what do you think? What do you think his upside is?
You know, he's playing pro in Taiwan, and you know, he's been an all-star both seasons, rookie of the year, led the league in assists, and he's accomplished a lot in his first 2 years. And we still feel like there's another step or two or three that he can take, and we know that he's much more talented than what people see. Even though he's done and played really well, I still think there's a lot more for him. And so we've just been working. We've been talking a lot. You know, it's fun working out with him and my trainer, because we all like basically coach each other. Yeah. So if he sees something with my game, I see something with his game, or my trainer sees something with either of our games, like we're able to just like hear another voice and opinion. And so he's just focused on his pro career out there, and hopefully he continues to grow and do amazing things, and kind of, you know, he's young, so he's only going to his third year out of college, so should be fun. Yeah. Well, you guys were generous and kind to stop by here in Brooklyn and record this podcast with us. We learned a lot. What are you guys up to the rest of the afternoon? What's something to get into? We're both fairly new to Brooklyn. Yeah. Any recommendations? Actually, we're just gonna explore. You know, I brought him, and then I have some other friends who are coming in, and they're all gonna meet, and we're just gonna explore the area, grab some good food, and kind of see what Brooklyn and this Williamsburg area has to offer. Yeah, it's great, man. All right, well, best of luck this season, and let's keep doing it. Maybe we'll do another podcast soon, because I'm sure a lot of people will like to hear more. You got a lot of wisdom. Sounds good. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. If you enjoyed the interview as much as I did, Jeremy's a tremendous human being. I love how he positions loyalty atop any hiring process.
Loyalty for me equals trust, and for any startup, a shortage of trust throughout the autonomy of action is a short hop downhill. Surround yourself with people you trust, even if it's family times business. Join me and apparently the rest of the world in following Jeremy across social media. You can find him across all of his platforms. It's at JLin7. And be the first to listen to future episodes as well as catch up on previous episodes, including my one-on-one conversation with legendary New England Patriots Dynasty head coach Bill Belichick, world-class tennis star and entrepreneur Venus Williams, and NFLPA executive director D. Smith. And that's just to name a few. You can find all these episodes and more on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your pods. And shortcut to our show notes, athlete list, news and headlines, links to articles and books, visit suitinguppodcast.com. As always, thanks for listening. I'm actively welcoming your feedback and suggestions. You can tweet at me. That's at Paul Rabil. Also, if there are any sports influencers you think I should be going after, let me know. We're outbounding every day. Still early days, everyone. I promise I'll respond. Tweet at me. Talk to you next week.